Thousands of years ago, God fathered a child on planet Earth who became the greatest man to ever live. His life story is an epic tale that people to this day spend years or even decades studying. His accomplishments were great and numerous, his actions just and righteous. He has captured both the respect and imagination of thousands and continues to do so to this day. He is a mighty man, a just man, and the King of Kings. I'm sure many of you know who I'm talking about. I am, of course, referring to God's son, Alexander the Great. People who knew Alexander the Great, who saw him, were eyewitnesses to his accomplishments, and often were close friends of his, said that he was the son of Zeus. Not only do we have writings from these people who knew Alexander, but we also have documents that were written when Alexander the Great came to Egypt and was greeted as a liberator and then confirmed by Egyptian priests to be the son of Zeus. People of differing cultures, and yes, even religion, came to the same conclusion about his divinity upon seeing him. There were rumors among the Greeks at the time that Alexander was of a divine lineage, but the Egyptians knew nothing of it. They independently came to the same conclusion as many Greeks had already come to. That aside, there is also the fact that he conquered almost the entire known world, leaving behind many historical documents and much archaeological evidence in his wake. For instance, the sudden expansion of Greek culture, a series of cities called Alexandria, which all happen to have been founded at around the same time. There are remains from his many battles and conquests, among thousands of other things. This is not only archaeological evidence in favor of his existence, but also in favor of his might, his strength, and his intelligence. This tells us that we are not dealing with an ordinary man. All this archaeological evidence tells us many things. For one, it confirms that he existed with almost complete certainty. It also means that he had done many amazing things in his lifetime. After all, taking a little known and up until that point insignificant nation in northern Greece, the Macedonians, and somehow turning them into the most powerful army in the world within a matter of a few years is an amazing accomplishment. Another important fact that it confirms is that the same historical accounts that confirm him as being the son of Zeus will write about him conquering the known world. Extraordinary claims do require extraordinary evidence. And the fact that historical documents that speak of his divinity can also accurately describe what we see through archaeological evidence is extraordinary. Thanks to this archaeological evidence, we know for a fact that those who wrote these documents describing Alexander the Great were not lying about his impressive accomplishments. So there's no reason to believe that they would lie about Alexander the Great's divinity either. Alexander taught us much about morality while he lived with us too. He showed just and righteous behavior as king of his empire by allowing those he conquered to be treated equally. Most mortal men of the day would feel tempted to try to enslave those they conquered, but not Alexander. His morality, inspired by his obvious divinity, led him to justly rule over those he conquered instead of treating them as if they were inferiors. This provides an example sent by Zeus himself that shows us how he wants us to treat each other. Now, some people might say that Alexander the Great's empire was short-lived, but I say you should expect that. The empire fell apart after his death because not even his greatest generals could hold it together. Those generals and other officials were some of the greatest mortal men on the planet, and not even with their combined intellect and influence could they hold together this grand empire. You would have to be a fool to believe that the man who created this grand empire from scratch, Alexander the Great, is anything but divine. Some might point out that there were a few who did not believe in the obvious divinity of Alexander the Great, but is it possible to convince everybody? The fact is that those who did not accept Alexander's divinity were extremely rare. Who are you going to believe? The majority of those who met him, or the few that may have seen him but still refused to accept it? Sometimes currency depicted pictures of Alexander the Great wearing a helmet with bull horns, or other symbols that held strong religious meanings for the cultures of that area. This is something the civilization using this currency wants to tell us. They're saying, this man, This man that we met in person is the son of a god, and we are willing to show the world that this is our firm belief. Alexander's divinity wasn't merely a political ploy. It wasn't a joke. It was something so much more than that. Let's compare Alexander the Great to another historical figure who is often considered to have a divine lineage by many who are living today. This figure, of course, being Jesus. Based on their moral teachings, we can see that Alexander the Great treated all those that he ruled over with respect and dignity. So we find that Jesus, although not lagging behind, has maybe met his match in terms of morality. As for historical documents, we know who is writing these documents that say Alexander the Great is the son of Zeus, unlike the anonymous Gospels where we can only guess who the real authors were. Often, they are assumed to be Jesus' disciples, Matt, Mark, Luke, and John. But that is unlikely, considering how the Gospels were not written until more than the average human's lifetime, about 30 years back then, after the events they describe. This brings us into our next comparison. The documents written about Alexander the Great were written during his lifetime, by contemporaries unlike the Gospels. These documents were also written by people of many different cultures and religions, and yet they rarely, if ever, contradict each other. Again, unlike the Gospels, which although were written by people who, at least supposedly, had the same religion, same cultural upbringing, and who witnessed these same events, still contradict each other repeatedly. Another thing we can compare is how people related to him or how people treated him. People who met Alexander the Great immediately realized he was the son of Zeus. Just look at the Egyptian prophets who not only declared him the son of Zeus, but also the master of the universe simply upon meeting him. By comparison, look at how the Sanhedrin and the Romans treated Jesus. Almost all fellow Jews, people of Jesus' own faith who believe in a messianic prophecy, did not accept him as the son of their God. Even the ones that Jesus met in person rarely believed his claims of divinity. A huge difference between these two individuals. But by far most importantly, Jesus left almost nothing behind him when he died. All that remained were a few followers who went around telling stories that can neither be supported nor considered likely. For Alexander the Great, however, we have an amazing amount of archaeological evidence that Alexander left behind, in addition to accurate historical documents that describe every event. So, if you are a true skeptic, which of these figures is more likely the son of a deity? Jesus didn't so much as cause a ripple during his life, and barely left a scratch when he died. Alexander the Great, on the other hand, created a tidal wave during his life, and when he died, left behind an empire.